This is our Engaging ELLs at the Appropriate Level of Rigor panel, and really super excited to be joined by José González, Daniela Torre, and Norma Sandoval. Just to give you a brief agenda, we do really want to foster discussion and collaboration here, so just some loose guidelines. We'll do an intro with everyone, and I'll talk about how to participate in the WebEx. Then we're going to do a little bit about the context of English language learners in the Common Core, share some best practices, and leave time for Q&A at the end. All right, so we'll go ahead and get started. I'd love if everyone could just give a quick 1 to 2 minute overview of your background and your current work with English language learners in kind of relation to our topic today. So we'll just go in the order that we're listed here, and starting with José.
Hi, good evening. Can you hear me?
We can, yeah.
Okay. My name is José González. I'm principal of Mount Pleasant Elementary STEAM Academy, and we've had the pleasure of having Sokikom with us for, well, since January. Our school has restructured into having a STEAM program since last year, so this is our second year.
Great. Awesome. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
And Daniela?
Great. So my name is Daniela Torre. I'm at Vanderbilt right now finishing up my PhD, and I study how schools can best support English learners, specifically here in the South where English learners are a new population. But I got drawn to this work for a couple reasons. First, because my family immigrated here from Argentina, and so I have a lot of family members who had to learn English the hard way. And then also because I was a bilingual teacher and ESL teacher in Washington, D.C. for several years, and so got to see how schools were serving and not serving students, and also just how students' backgrounds really impacted the opportunities that they had. That's a little bit about myself, and I'm happy to be here.
Great. Thanks so much for joining us. And then Norma?
Yes, my name is Norma Sandoval, and I am Lakeside District Language Coordinator. I oversee both the ELLs and the Spanish immersion side of our programs. I am also a nationally board certified teacher in the area of English as a new language, and I taught ELs as well as honors English and other high school courses. I did middle school and high school for about 12 years.
Great. Awesome. Well, I'm so excited just to have such a diverse panel with incredible backgrounds and knowledge on the topic. So really looking forward to fostering this discussion. I've got some guiding questions here that came from registrants for the panel. So I'll use these as a conversation starter, but please feel free to jump in and share your expertise as you see fit. I definitely don't want you to hold anything back. So leverage the chat, talk amongst each other, and I'll kind of started off with one of the questions that, given that the Common Core state standards have increased rigor and content for all students, what are some of the main concerns that you have about ELL students being able to access this new content? And maybe to start it off, I'll turn that to José.
I think for us, the main challenge we have is providing the professional development to our teachers to understand the new components of the ELD standards, and understanding the new concepts of giving students access to content as they are also developing the language skills, English language skills. So I see that as one of our biggest challenges. We are providing some professional development, but it is a new concept that we're tackling in with different ways, but we're not there yet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't think anyone is quite yet. It's all new. What about Norma or Daniela? Have you found similar things or anything to add to that about concerns about ELL students being able to access the Common Core content?
Yeah, I was going to say two things. So first, I really like this one saying that a researcher at Stanford said. He says, it's not that ELs have to meet new standards, it's that they get to meet them. And I think that that's the way that we should approach teaching ELs with the Common Core framework. They're really rigorous, and I think we also can't be complacent, because for them to reach that bar, there's a lot of hard work. And like Jose was saying, I think that teachers are where we need to start. especially considering maybe not in California where teachers have to be certified, but in places like North Carolina or Tennessee, there are no policies in place to make sure that teachers have any training or even adequate training in schools. So I think that connecting with teachers to make sure that they know how to scaffold instruction and differentiate for students, but also that they know how to connect with the families and access the background information that students come to is really important.
Yeah, I echo both what Jose and Daniela mentioned. Staff development is definitely key. I would like to say that I kind of started working on the strategy of Common Core when I was still in the classroom with the leadership of Doug Fisher, which is one of the gurus of Common Core throughout here in San Diego, for example, San Diego State. He actually worked in our community and had us doing a lot of the Common Core strategies way back when I was in the classroom. And it was not just our ELs who are struggling, it's students in general who do not know how to access, curriculum. And one of the challenges I found, even though I, as a professional, challenged my students, that was a challenge I faced, was that the students were not accustomed to being encouraged to be critical thinkers and bringing the ideas out of the text versus me just, giving them the sponge model of having just absorbed what I say. So I think that would be a challenge of how do we equip the students with those skills in a comprehensible manner. Personally, I use the Right Institute. I don't know if we're able to share resources or not, but
yeah,
scaffolding it for our students, making it very visible, very attainable, graphic organizers that are, friendly to use. That proved to me to be very effective, and it served not only for my ELs, but also for my honors level students. And so being able to give students a structure, and here are the strategies that good readers or good writers do, I think is key in order for them to be successful, because otherwise we can give them all the rhetoric, but if they don't have something concrete about what it means to be a critical thinker, they're not going to get there. So we need to be able to give them the target and give them those target points about how to get there.
Also, I'd like to add, Norma, you just gave me an idea. We can also use this opportunity to take what we know about instruction for ELs and bring it to other students, because I think that a lot of times ESL teachers really break down the lesson. So we use SIOP in Tennessee, and so breaking down language objectives for each lesson is something that all teachers can use to make Common Core more accessible for everyone and make sure that they're hitting all those rigorous language requirements in all their content areas. So really just pulling that all together is a good idea.
I wanted to mention that in regards to the strategies, it is true, having the scaffolding, but I think I think it was Norma mentioned, it's that critical thinking component, and many of our students have learned to be passive in the classrooms and not to be challenged with, participating in the class. And so I think that it's not only the strategies, but also, as Ms. Torre mentioned, is having that social, emotional, or cultural understanding of the students and their families in order to bring them in, because many times with the Latino students, we tend to be passive sometimes. And so it's that the teacher's initiative in including the students and questioning them and using higher order thinking strategies to engage them in the conversations, and not just dwell in the superficial aspects of, setting or characters' names, but actually looking into nonfiction and making connections between two different texts or different types of medium for them to analyze and provide something new and synthesize new information.
Yeah, and just,
go ahead.
I was going to say, just adding to that, I think that the critical thinking piece is a really good place for us to build on our students' assets and their background culture. So asking them to connect to what they know and make those leaps and discuss them while also going back to the content, I think is a really good place to start, and make sure that they're always relating what they're learning in school to the larger themes that are prevalent everywhere, and to the themes that are prevalent in their own lives.
That brings back to, a minute ago when we were talking about rigor, some of the things that we also incorporated was the interdisciplinary work between English and social studies and math and history. And that was something else that I think that's still missing. I know that we created that when I was in the classroom, and I did a unit on health, and it tapped into the texts that we read. I had my students read like 3-4 books on young adult issues, and then I had them read about the psychological, but also the medical and the body functions in science about how does smoking affect your body, or how does, you know, being addicted to drugs or eating disorders, and all of these issues surrounding the physiology of a teenager. And then in math, looking at statistics and looking at how many students out of this many, and how do you, and then doing the survey. And then finally in history, understanding the critical implications of social justice, and incorporating a lot of Paulo Freire's critical pedagogy was really key in being able to create very engaging lessons that, like the Common Core, you were able to go deeper into it, that it was like a 4 to 6 week lesson, but it was, or unit I should say, but it really allowed the kids to make the connections with all my other colleagues because we shared the same prep, so we were able to plan accordingly. What are you doing? What are you doing? Okay, how can we work together to support each other? And although we've always heard that these are good practices, the reality is that our school systems are not created to support that. And even when they are, when people have the same common prep, the instructional leadership is not always supportive or knowledgeable or doing enough to be able to oversee that it is working and that, you know, it's benefiting the students to be able to make all these connections across disciplines.
Yeah.
You know, as I said, we're not there yet, but something that we have found useful is the use of project-based learning.
Yeah.
And there's so this is our second year using that, and we had training through the Buck Institute. And so I find that implementing PBL in the classrooms allows the students, or gives them the access to that higher order thinking. And even though it's not addressing ELD or, ELD specifically, but it does create like a high interest environment for the students that will motivate them to learn more and to incorporate the new vocabulary, you know, instead of just having them memorize a list of words, but actually use them in the project. So we're a TK, transitional kinder to 5th grade class, and every grade level has a question to address. And like the first graders, we're working on, they decided, the students, to create a recycling program in our school because we only recycle paper but not plastic or glass. And so they learn in our science class how paper is recycled. So they had all those experiments to do. And as they're doing this, they're also learning the language and using some of those sentence frames to present as well as they completed their projects, and actually creating the project of getting the cans and the bottles to have some parents take it to the recycling center and actually gain some money from that to pay for their field trips. But I think the biggest gain was their understanding of how materials change. So at the same time we're addressing science, you know, how you can go from a solid to a liquid to a gas, and how plastic is melted, and so that was of high interest, and it addressed some of those, you know, ELD components as well. So I think that's a great tool. We're still working and trying to get better at it, but I think the Buck Institute or PBL is out there to address the needs of our students.
Great. Yeah, thank you so much for for sharing that. That sounds like an awesome project that I think a lot of people could take back and implement at their sites in different ways as well. And I'm interested because you kind of hinted at this with the project-based learning and kind of the critical thinking aspect. And so one of the questions that we had is kind of taking a step back, what should Rigor look and sound like for English language learner students?
Rigor, in my view, is being able to challenge the students to go a step beyond than just sitting there and taking what the teacher says. It's inquiring and bringing the curiosity of the students so that they are encouraged to read a text, even if it's 3 times harder than what their potential is, because of, like Jorge was saying, that, oh, wait, not Jorge, Juan was saying, when you create an interest with the students, you are automatically engaging the bigs and the caps. You know, they're going to start talking and they're going to start engaging, even if they're afraid to speak the language. Now they have a purpose for that language. And the same thing with the reading. If you are researching, like he was mentioning, recycling, well, I'm now going to look at, you know, maybe this is a Union Tribune paper and I'm in 2nd grade, but I'm going to read it to see, because it's talking about recycling in schools, and I may need some help. You know, Mrs. Salazar, can you help me with this word? I don't know what this word means. But the student is motivated for that learning. So that, to me, is rigor. When you provide children with, you know, materials that are more difficult than they're able to access, but they continue through it and they persevere and they find the strategies to get the information they need.
And I was going to add that I think that when we think of rigor, there's a couple of things that I think we overlook. That first, rigor isn't necessarily harder, it's thinking deeper, which you guys were just both talking about, so thinking critically and bringing your own ideas to the table. But I think also when we think of rigor, we often just think of what's going on with the students and not how the teachers need to change to support the rigor that they're putting in the classroom. So I think that with that in mind, all these wonderful projects that you guys are describing take a lot of work and a lot of skill on the side of the teacher or any leader in the school who wants to organize that sort of environment. And so it takes a lot of hard work, and then also the teacher being caring enough for the students to understand exactly where they are and how they can push them that one step further without making them shut down or scared or feel like they don't want to participate anymore.
Yeah, I believe, yeah, that was a challenge, an initial challenge when we decided to become a STEAM Academy, because you do have to have that care that you mentioned, and also provide the teachers the time to collaborate and be able to do this, because you can't expect them just to meet on their time and do this. So our district has supported our schools with having a collaboration for our teachers basically once a month. So we have our science, we have a PE teacher, music, and an art teacher that rotate with our students and provide additional art, music, and PE classes. And so our teachers have the whole day to collaborate and come up with those awesome PBL units. But sometimes you have to adjust them, even though we created some of them in the beginning of the year during the summer. But then as the year goes, they have to adjust because maybe the student's interest was not what you thought in the beginning of the year. So I agree. It has to be a culture in the school, and also the administration has to understand that you need to provide the time for the teachers to do that, and also to be there to check that those units are rigorous, that they're implementing the standards. For example, art. In California we have art standards, fine arts. So those were it was kind of eye-opening for me that we were including the arts in our STEAM program, but we were not using the art standards to the level that we should have been using them. So I guess, yeah, creating a sense of culture and also providing the resources and time for the teachers to be able to provide those, create those lessons, those PBL units.
I think another important thing to add to that is just you can bring that to the teachers, right? So as a leader, asking your teachers, what do you think rigor means for our ELs, especially if you're in a school where it's not a really large population, so most teachers may not interact with very many ELs, asking, how are you pushing these students and what do you think that a high quality lesson is for these students? so that everyone's on the same page, and that culture includes an expectation that's high for all students regardless of their language proficiency.
I do want to also add what it's not, because I think that oftentimes that's what we get bogged down on. It's like, oh, you know, ELs, oh, then that means doing worksheets and just focusing on I am and the very basic of English. And that's not rigorous at all. That's providing vocabulary, yes, which is necessary, but that's not accessing the content and the curriculum. And so we need to be careful of that, because too many of us as educators feel that we're doing students a service by that, and we're not. And so to me, even if it means I give a student something in their native language, because they're accessing the curriculum, they're accessing that rigor of the critical thinking. Yes, the language will be developed eventually in English, but in the meantime, I'm giving you the keys of how to access the content. So making sure that we're not stigmatized by the fact that a student that's an EL, they cannot do something.
Norma, I couldn't agree with you more, and I'd actually written a note here that for teachers, I think a big thing that they need to learn and let go of is that perfection in language, and that the grammar and the vocabulary being perfect is the goal, whereas the content mastery and the critical thinking should be the goal. And so to learn to just let students present their ideas as best they can in their native language, or using pictures as scaffolds, or using a friend to help, and not making them feel like they can't participate because their language isn't perfect.
Right.
And I agree with that as well.
Great. And yeah, thank you so much, Norma, for bringing us back and reminding, too. I think it's equally as important to talk about what it doesn't look like. And you guys kind of were transitioning into a question that one of our participants had, that was, how can you integrate these ELD standards with the Common Core standards? And I think that's kind of what you're saying, Norma, they can't be two separate things. So what are some other strategies that you've seen work for integrating those and supporting ELs to acquire the necessary language skills?
I think it has to be focused, given on, just like we do professional learning communities that teach us to look at the data. What is it that the students are needing? Are they having trouble with the ER? Are they having trouble with adjectives, with verbs? And being able to do like mini lessons that maybe are 10, 15 minutes, and then move on. Okay, let's make a goal of what you need, Sally, versus Mary, or are you seeing it whole wide in the classroom versus, okay, today all the class is going to learn about X, Y, and Z for 45 minutes. And I have found that you're going to tune students out if you're just talking about grammar and vocabulary all throughout. But if you're engaging them in a project, and then you're giving them the vocabulary to access that topic, and then you're encouraging them to write, and then you could see what are the areas that we could develop using the ELD standards as well, and saying, okay, where are my students and where can I, where should they be? What else can I do? I also provided the students with other activities outside of the classroom that I knew they could do. Being middle school and high school, many of them knew the basic structure of language in their native language. So I was able to make those transfers. Okay, you know how in Spanish you conjugate each person in the past, present, and future? Well, in English, this is the way it works. And, in many Asian languages, they don't have an actual past tense. They just say yesterday, today, and tomorrow, right? Yes, okay, so this is how it is in English. And being able to give them those, ways to practice language either online or paper-based or whatever it may be, but giving them the independent practice outside of the classroom and providing that support in the classroom as well while we follow up on them. Each child had, in my classroom, a sheet of where they were, and I constantly told them, this is where you're at now, here's where you could be, and this is how you're going to get there. If you read at home, if you study these words, if you do X, Y, and Z, it's going to come to you. And the students who did it improved, right? And the students who had a harder time and only did the work in the classroom, they took longer to get there, but they were well aware of where they were as far as English language development.
Mm-hmm. And did that require some collaboration with parents as well at home to have kind of goal setting for the family and have all the stakeholders involved in that?
I was very open, and I called my parents once a month. I had 100 students, and I try to call at least each one of them. So it was, but I'm going to be honest, it was a low socioeconomic background, and parents are overwhelmed trying to just live by and being able to have 2 jobs, and it's difficult for parents to be able to support the students. So I used that as a motivator for my kids. I said, look at me. I grew up in this community as well, and I was able to be where I'm at because I had to be on my own. My parents didn't provide me that support. So I gave them that testimony, and I said, if you want to, someday you'll be able to help your parents be able to have a bigger house. And I saw that was more of a motivator, and you're not going to be able to save all kids. I went into education thinking I was, but when kids see me again, my middle school students, they know everything I motivate them then. They said, I wish I had listened to you, and now I'm turning it around. So it's nice that they know what they can do and be able to say that it went with them. And so being able to continuously tell the students about where they can be and taking them to the university on conferences or visiting places outside of the community, those were also very important aspects of being able to bring that world to them. That it's not just their neighborhood, that should be the world to them.
Yeah, that's really helpful, and it's interesting to me as we're kind of talking about these standards and Common Core standards and ELD standards, and what's been mentioned a lot is so far beyond that, and these project-based learning and trips and things like that. So how do you balance, I think this is a golden question that everyone's asking for all students, but how do you balance meeting those standards and also doing these things to get kids engaged and get them really involved and excited about what they're working on?
I never thought of it as having to balance them because you have to do them. In our schools, we or at least in California, we provide a time for ELD around 30 to 40 minutes a day, where they are in a specific group with students in similar levels. And then throughout the day, they're just in their regular classrooms with, all sorts of levels, which is, where you have to integrate more of that language access. But it goes back to planning. I think teachers have to have the time to plan and create those, as I think Norma mentioned, focus lessons for them, to be strategic into what you're going to teach. And also, I was thinking of, principals that you also have to be there to check that everything is happening, because it's very easy to get pulled into different things and not be an instructional leader, not be in the classroom, understanding what is happening and what kind of needs, are coming up for the students and the teachers. And so, being present, being part of the day, being in the classrooms, it's really important, because we can have a lot of ideas, but then they may not be happening in the classroom. And it goes back to the principal, basically checking that things are happening, that the language objectives are there, that they're being used in the classroom, that the strategies are being used, and that you're coaching people, helping, making people grow, not just pointing out what's not happening, but, helping the teachers, just like how we want to motivate our students, we also have to motivate our teachers, our educators.
I also think two things that we can do to make that easier is using data, which is so trendy these days, but really using data to make sure we know where our students are, and also so the teachers can be motivated by small goals instead of an overwhelming project. And then also backwards mapping. So it sounds like in your school you must use this to do these big projects. So starting with the standards in mind and working backwards to say, how are we going to meet every one of these in a way that's engaging for the children?
Correct. Yeah, we use concept maps. Yeah, which is pretty much the same. Yeah, of backwards mapping.
Okay.
Awesome.
Jen,
yeah.
I was also wanted to share a resource. I also have feedback right now. Does everyone else hear that? I don't know. Yeah. Okay, great. I wanted to share a resource with everyone here that is, they've developed it in New York, and it's a map of standards to activities and a lot of resources that connect language standards to the Common Core. And I think that is just a nice place to start if people are struggling. So I'm going to put a link up if you guys can investigate at will.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I think that definitely hits on a lot of the questions that people that were interested in this webinar had mentioned. I think another key one, I'll definitely share this out with people, and we've also touched on this a bit, but strategies to leverage students' cultural knowledge and home knowledge. I know you mentioned connecting to your own personal background, Norma, but what about for teachers that don't necessarily have that, or what are some resources and strategies they can use?
Well, I worked in a very multicultural community. We had about 33 different languages spoken. So I relied on my community to come in and be able to teach me about how to best access, resources for my students. And I turned to my own students that may be more aware or more vocal to be able to provide me resources. And so I think that empowers students. I remember one of my students who's now a community organizer and led an organization where I was a participant in, and she reminded me, she said, you always questioned us. Why is this situation here? And you never gave us answers. You're always having us ask questions. And one time you asked me, why don't we have Somali homelessness? And I had never thought about it. And I went back and I researched it. And I think that's the key. When you validate the children's voice, when you validate the families and you let them be part of the curriculum and being able to guide the learning, that engages any student. And so what we're talking about, I think that we're all having the same discussion about, yes, the standards are there. The standards allow for us to say, we want to have students to be critical thinkers and be able to collaborate and be able to engage in dialogue and be able to brainstorm ideas and come up with a resolution. But in the end, it's how do you get them to engage? And when you have that hook, it's easier to bring them together. And I think in this world, our society right now is falling apart precisely because we're not validating our students' voices. And when we do that, when we allow cultural proficiency, we learn about each other, there's less, the walls are torn down because it's okay to sit with, Amina because I know that, I'm a girl, but whereas if it's a guy in her cultural awareness, her culture, it's not always accepted for a male to sit with a female because of, our religious reasons, not because I don't like you, and so I think that when students begin to understand the behaviors that certain students exhibit, it's powerful, and being able to touch each other's heart versus just attitude really goes a long way in being able to get the students to collaborate and build community and know how to work with each other, especially in 21st century job market, that you have to be able to work with everyone from different diversities, from different ethnic backgrounds, socioeconomics, experiences in general. So I think that we as educators need to really use what's burning. Take the students; they should be your curriculum. What's driving them? And I think the power with Common Core is that it allows us that freedom. I don't want to say completely, but you use the standards to be able to guide your own professional reading. What are the resources I could take? The nonfiction, the fiction, the tales from the student's family. I could sit here and talk forever, but it's about the students. What engages the kids?
I was going to just add that I think that it's really important, what you were saying, to model being both caring and curious at the same time. So in your classroom, caring enough to ask your students about their lives, which doesn't always happen, and their backgrounds and what their parents do and where they came from, but also curious, so that the other students learn to ask before they judge. So I think that the teachers are well positioned to do that.
In our district, we have we've received professional development by Dr. Shiraki Hali. I don't know if you're aware of
Yes.
his work. And so a tool that comes to mind, similar to what you mentioned, is called VABing, which is an acronym for Validate, Affirm, Bridge, Build, and Bridge. And so as we hear something, that it's maybe not the right way to behave or something to say in the classroom, like a student saying, oh, this class is boring, something like that, that you may be offended by it, or you may think that the student is being rude. You could validate, okay, yes, the class may be boring or something like that, and then you affirm, but then you also start building the student and then bridging to the mainstream that, okay, in a classroom setting we don't say this, right? But it's the other components, instead of just sending the student to the office or giving the student a check or something punitive. You validate their point, affirm, build, and then bridge. And so it's something new for us, well, at least for my teachers. And so it's something that we're implementing to see the students and to understand, as you mentioned, that they may not be sitting, that a boy may not be sitting close to a girl because of religious reasons, so they understand. In our school, 90% of our students are Hispanic. Most of our students are the parents are from Mexico. We have some students from El Salvador, and then the other 10% are Filipino and Vietnamese students. So those are pretty much our cultures in our school, and everything we do is bilingual or trilingual when I'm able to translate into Vietnamese when I communicate with my parents. But it's a small group. It's only we only have 5 Vietnamese students, but the majority of our students are Latinos, and so our teachers are very aware of that. So anything that comes in, we try to connect to the different cultures, with whether it's a holiday or just in general, what's happening in the classroom, and also to student culture, because that's another component, right? The students have their own culture, their own music, and so we need to be aware of their youth culture to be able to bond and bridge to the mainstream.
Great. Yeah, thanks so much for sharing that. And I think a lot of that resonates, and I appreciate the focus on students. And I really like that you said, Norma, that the student should be your curriculum. And Jose, you've mentioned some of these things, is just leveraging that and making that part of everything that you do. I'm interested to hear, I know, Jose, you have to jump off soon. And so just talking about, I think we've done a great exploration of kind of the status of things and some different things you've tried. I'm curious to hear, what do you see as the biggest area of need or the biggest challenge? You mentioned we're not quite there yet. What are some things that you'd like to see change in the next year, couple of years?
I think we just need to continue working, in our case, with the professional development, really understanding the ELD standards, making them present in our schools, using the PLCs, right, and so we can continue checking data, and using assessments, as Daniela mentioned, to see the growth that is occurring with their students and validate also their efforts, and just being present in the classrooms, and checking that things are happening, that we are connecting to our students' cultures, and being student-centered or community-centered, and just growing that way. So I guess we already have the tools. We just have to get better at using them, and having a deeper understanding of Common Core. And so I don't think we need something new. I think our district has provided a lot of those tools. It's just becoming experts.
Great.
And yes, thank you. I teach a karate club in my school, so I gotta go change and get ready for my kids.
All right. Well, thank you so much for being with us right up until that class. We really appreciate it, and such valuable insight added. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
Thanks. I am actually, I don't want to say excited, but I am pleased that we're doing Common Core in spite of everyone's objection to it. because I think it finally pushes all of us educators to really scaffold the lessons for their children and be able to make it accessible to something rigorous. Because too many times we water it down and we water it down and we water it down, and then the kids get nothing. And there's no power in that. And so to be able to, because so many of our teachers are now just engulfed in Common Core, they're not really paying attention to what they're doing to our ELs, honestly. They're just focused on Common Core and surviving Common Core and making sure that everyone in the classroom is understanding it. And in doing that, they're using good teaching practices. They have to resort to other practices that typically are the ones that should be given to our ELs, you know, our scaffolding, our graphic organizers, the opportunity to talk to your peers. These are all elements that should have been included all the time, and in reality are not. You know, we typically have an ELB class where the teacher's talking, and the students are not given the opportunity to sit there and talk and listen to your peers and see how they are speaking English. And am I speaking it better than them? Am I speaking it, okay, look how they're talking, maybe I should say it this way, instead of just the teacher model that's, you know, above everyone else's ability. So I know a lot of people don't like Common Core, but I personally appreciate it because it does provide a common leverage point where we push all kids up. And yes, we have the ELD that are based on the mainstream Common Core standards, but I think that overall it will be a greater improvement for the knowledge and the way that we teach overall for all kids, and it will definitely improve for our ELs.
Great, and I definitely agree that the Common Core is a great opportunity for teachers and educators to reflect. I think that one area that I would like to see more attention is with our long-term ELs and how to make sure that we don't forget about the Common Core with these students in an effort to get them out of the situation, or because we think that they need remediation and they need the grammar sheets. So I really think that the conversation needs to include our students who are struggling to reach that benchmark of proficiency. And also just listening to both Norma and Jose, it's been really inspiring to hear what you guys are doing. And just from the East Coast perspective, in places like Tennessee and North Carolina and Georgia, it's very different. And so I think sharing the resources from places that have a lot of experience with ELs with places that are really new to this game. They don't really know what to do. Their teachers have very little cultural competence or training or knowing how to scaffold or knowing about language objectives, making sure that there's an effort to bring the knowledge to areas that are developing this so that those students don't become marginalized in those areas.
I think that's a really great point, and I'm so happy to have people from both coasts or both areas participating in this for that reason. And one of the big questions, too, that people had is, are there collaborating groups of educators or schools that are focused on this, or resources that we can share to kind of keep this conversation going beyond our short hour that we have here today?
I would say a great place to start, and I've shared this with you, Jen, is with the Stanford Understanding Language Institute. They have a really excellent website that has lesson plans and resources and also just links. And one thing that they offer for teachers is a free MOOC for how to apply the Common Core and to use the Common Core with your ELs. And I think that it's just an incredible wealth of information that's just sitting there for free.
Great. I'll be sure to send that out to everyone. Norma, do you have, from your experience, any groups that you're part of or collaborative efforts out here on the West Coast that maybe we could share with people in other cities?
I know that here in California we have CABE, which is California Association of Bilingual Education. They're really big on both ELs and bilingual education in general. We have, I know that ACTFL, God, I can't think of, it's an acronym, ACTL. They also, it's a nationwide American Council of Foreign Teachers of Language, something to that effect. And they also have resources I really base my practice a lot on critical pedagogy and being able to see what is locally engaging for the students and being able to take them to these experiences and making it authentic as possible. And I think that having that network with teachers is great to get all these ideas that we're sharing right now. And I'm already, my brain is already spinning to what Daniela's talking about in the East Coast. I'm like, maybe I should fly over there and
we welcome you.
Get a job over there or something. But because it is, I know that, the United States is increasing in Spanish-speaking students across. And but I think it's also important for us to stay on top of research. And I don't know, I know that Twitter has a lot of groups of people that are networking, but I don't know of any specific one at this point that is out there that I'm part of at all. But just keeping in contact with my personal colleagues that I've met and statewide experts and visiting these conferences and learning from Stephen Krashen and language experts in general, that to me has been the motivator to continue and searching and seeking more opportunities for our EL. But yeah, I think this is a great opportunity for us to continue the work, and I really appreciate you guys doing this today.
Great, and we can't tell you how much we appreciate you contributing to the conversation. I agree, it's totally exciting, and also it's got my mind spinning of like, how can we bring people together when you're working on the same thing thousands of miles apart? So I'm excited that we've got the groundwork for that. We do have about 8 minutes left here, so I do want to open it up for questions from the participants. If you want to chat them in, or if you want to, you can go ahead and say them. And also, Norma and Daniela, if you think there's anything we've left out of this conversation that you'd like to share, feel free to go ahead.
Well, I think it's important for us to continue, turning to those of us that are in the work, and feel free to share my email if anyone wants to contact me. I love to listen to what everyone else is doing, and I pick people's brains, and then they pick my brain, and I think that's the best way that we move forward, is validating, because sometimes you're in this little area and you're not sure if the things that you're doing are the best practices, and then when you hear, oh, wow, that's innovative, like, really? I've been doing this for so long that I forget whether it's good or not. And so, yeah, feel free to do that, and, I welcome any comments and questions people may have.
I think another important thing is for ESL teachers specifically to become powerful advocates for their students within their communities. Yeah. So often, not everyone has the specialized knowledge about second language acquisition and things like the silent period. I can't tell you how many teachers I've talked to who get angry at their kids because they won't speak. And so just really making sure that as a teacher who's interested and connected to these students, you're sharing this knowledge with other people, and not just the English, teacher, but the math teacher and the gym teacher, so that everyone can start building that same common toolkit of practices and understanding, so that everyone's really helping with these students, and the ELs become everyone's students instead of just one teacher's students.
And know that you're not alone. I had a lot of situations that I also had to bring the law, not law like call it the forces, but I had to bring the legislative piece to our administrator or to the person in charge of our ELD department that had no knowledge. For some reason, they just got selected to lead the group, and they had no knowledge of working with ELs. And so not being afraid that you're, doing the right thing. And even if you get your hand slapped, that means you're doing the right thing. That be willing to sometimes take that and swallow it and keep going, because, they say, in Espanol they say, caminante no hay camino, haces el camino al andar. There's not going to be a path already made done for you. So sometimes you have to break ground and be that first pioneer that gets butchered on the way. But just be willing to know that you're doing what's right for kids.
Yeah, and I think if you're not being butchered, I think that there's a lot of really good intended people out there, people who really want to do best by their ELs and are trying their best but just don't know where to start. So starting with those people to create a cadre inside your school of people who are also interested and can be the leaders who buffer you from the butchering, I guess.
Yeah, don't go out there and butcher yourself either. We want to have advocates in the classroom. So just be careful. That's what I'm trying to say. Be careful how you navigate that and reach out to those of us that have gone through that path and seek validation, because it can be very lonely, and it can be those moments that you question yourself, am I doing the best thing for our kids? So absolutely reach out to those of us who know the work and can provide that support and moral, the moral support for you.
I think another thing to add to this is just the importance of reaching out to a student's family. As you're saying, Norma, it's really hard, and especially with our low-income students whose parents may be very busy. But I think that it's just very important to respect people's families and where they are and bring them in as much as possible. Because, you know, I think that a lot of times people can be very dismissive of parents because it's so hard, and then they stop trying. And then that can be really toxic, I think, for the relationship between home and school, and then for the relationship between the student and the teacher as well. So I'm not an expert about how to overcome those obstacles, but I think that's somewhere that we need, that should be incorporated in any sort of discussion about Common Core or standards or education for ELs is, well, how do we also bring this knowledge to our parents so they know what we're doing in school, and they can also bring in their own expertise to help us with educating their children.
I concur.
All right. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. I think lots of good ideas coming out of this and good conversations. I'm excited to follow up with some of these resources. The last question I did have on here that some people were interested in is just impact that you've seen of different bilingual and dual language instruction models, and how you see that sort of shifting and developing in the upcoming years.
I can speak a little bit from experience about what not to do. So I worked my first job was as a teacher in a dual language program in Washington, D.C., and it was just implemented very poorly. There was very little community buy-in. There was no training for the teachers. I was creating all of the resources, sending them to my dad to proofread to make sure the Spanish was correct and my accents were perfect, and that sort of thing. And I think that was a travesty for our children because it didn't work. And I think that in the end, they got the impression that it wasn't important to speak Spanish in important situations. So I think that what's really important is that making sure if you're going to be a part of a dual language program or bilingual program that just speaking the language isn't enough. It's a program that needs to be implemented with fidelity, and it needs to have a lot of buy-in from the community or it's just not going to work.
I agree. And actually, in 21st century skills, that's vital. Our district is actually, we currently have one way, and so many of our students are English only, learning Spanish. And our ELs I'm working with one of our principals to create a dual immersion in our district. And like Daniela said, I'm making sure that we have high quality Spanish teachers to be able to come in. I've spoken to the staff. I have a PTA meeting this coming Monday. I've spoken to the Spanish-speaking ELD parents, and everyone's excited. Understandably, our English-only teachers were concerned that, oh my God, they're going to take over. And like, no, we definitely need ELs to make sure that this program works. And giving that equity, being able to ensure that it's not just for English-only students, that we foster our English learners' abilities to contribute back to the family, to the education of their peers, validating their voice. And I was a vice principal last year at one of our middle schools, and what I integrated was our newcomer ELs entered the immersion program, and they took at least 2 of their classes in Spanish, and so they were the experts in the language. And the 8th graders, when they promoted, I had our EL parents, going back to what Daniela was saying about incorporating our parents and being able to give them voice. That's a good way to do it. You know, they felt, oh, wow, I get to vote. I mean, I get to decide how well the students speak Spanish. Yeah, because you're an expert in the language. And so when they sat there and they saw our blonde children with blue eyes speaking Espanol, they were mesmerized. They were in love with the fact that it's okay to speak Espanol. You should foster that at home. And that to them meant the world, because too many times we hear, no, you're in America, learn English, without recognizing that we live in the 21st century where it's important for you to learn more than one language. And if you already have one, foster it and grow with it. So, yeah, that's what doing immersion. You definitely want to have that parent engagement and being able to provide sound practices, as Daniela said. Don't do a program just because, you know, they're asking for it. Make sure that you take your steps necessary to ensure that you have all the proper components in place to make it successful. If anything else, make sure you have the teachers behind it and the parents.
I would say, just to add one more thing, you made me think of this term that's become more popular of emerging bilinguals as a term to refer to ELs. And I think it's a really beautiful way to capture the fact that these students have a language and they have knowledge and skills, and we're going to teach them how to be bilingual and have that power as a bilingual speaker. And so I think when that is the benefit I saw in a dual language program, is validating the student's language, showing the parents that, I found that some parents, Latino parents, would be reticent to have a dual language program because they thought that their kids would then be behind. So showing them that it's also important to foster bilingualism.
Great. Well, what a wonderful way to close that out here. I think that's a great term, emerging bilingual. And I'm also I want to reiterate how Daniela kind of started this out by saying it's not that English learners have to meet the new standards, and they get to meet them. So I just can't thank you guys enough for your time and participation today. And I think we just had a wonderful, positive approach to this conversation, and I'm excited to keep it going. I'll be sure to share along contact information so that we can make sure that it doesn't stop here and this collaboration can continue.
Great, thank you.
Thanks.